signs are all over the place. So 1 minute you're in the city limits, 1 minute you're not. How are you going to know the law? And while it's a totally different kind of thing, that's the same kind of situation. I mean, if you're allowed to get married, same-sex marriage in Massachusetts, which I think is the state that's passed it, and then you're in South Carolina and it doesn't have it, and you go to Vermont and they do have it, you never know, where you're legal and where you're not. So in that case, I do think that's a situation where the federal government ought to lay a standard that says it's marriages between one man and one woman.
Exactly. Now to move beyond the confines of political, just foolishness per se, into the realm of something that's really beginning to take hold. You also are a member of the mayor's environmental committee. I'm forgiving if you could tell me that.
I'm on the National League of Cities Energy, Environment, and Natural Resources Committee.
Okay. And first and foremost, that's a very liberal organization.
Yes,
with all
sir.
the mayors and, yeah.
I am in the minority on that.
But my thought to you is, on that particular group, is there a world view that global warming exists and that global warming is the fault of men?
Yeah. There's a real active group. Sustainability is a big issue with that committee, and in cities in general. When you go to the National League meeting, they spend a lot of time talking about sustainability, and which is a buzzword for, I think, some of this stuff with Agenda 21.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I first got on the committee, and this is where I will have to say that the folks that I work with, and they're a fine group of people. That, like I said, I'm the conservative Republican in the group. There's a few of us, but we're small. They did at least try to define what sustainability meant, because when I remember sitting there when I first got on the committee and we started talking about it, that it was very, very broad. It was almost too hard to understand. And one of the things when you asked me about Agenda 21, and I didn't you kind of explained to me, how it had taken some news, gotten into the news here lately. I went back and looked at some of this stuff, and that's one of the things that I was surprised at reading some of the articles, was that a lot of this stuff was deliberately written broad. So they could push this UN agenda. Well, it makes some sense, and I will have to say that they did try to define it a little better than it had been, and narrow the scope. But anyway, in
your opinion, do you believe that it's a prudent thing for the United States to subscribe to treaties that put at risk the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, private property rights, and so on?
No. I mean, private property is, I think that's almost what the economy is based on. In a lot of ways, your ability to own your own home, to own your own business, own your own family farm, own property. And this business where the government's going to come in here and tell you, especially in rural America, what dictate terms to you is I think, a very scary thought.
Exactly. Now, it hasn't really caught on east. I know that in the metropolitan areas, they talk about smart growth in suburbia, but a lot is kept under wraps regarding rural America. I want to play for you a clip, and this is Congressman Rob Bishop. He is from Utah, and he's explaining what's happening out west with the initiation of Agenda 21.
Well, is the federal government plotting a huge land grab? Republican Utah Congressman Rob Bishop claims that 13 million acres, maybe even more, all throughout the West are at stake. And he says he has documents from the Department of Interior to prove it. Congressman Bishop is kind enough to join us now to talk about this. Great to have you today.
Thanks for being here.
And it's nice to have you in D.C. because you're actually vacationing here this week. So instead of going home, you're with us helping the local tourism industry.
It's a great place to be with you always, yeah.
All right, so let's talk about this potential land grab issue. You found out through an internal memo that was within the Department of Interior, initially leaked missing some pages. You found those missing pages. What about that has you concerned about the federal government trying to get its hands on some land out west?
Well, first of all, we have not received all the documents yet. We received the first set of documents. There's still more that have been promised to us that have not yet come. And what they show is that even though this government already owns 1 out of every 3 acres in America, and disproportionately in the West, they still want to buy more land. They want to control private property around it, and they want to do it even if Congress documents were how to go around Congress to implement this kind of plan. What this means for the West particularly is a stopping of our economy, more jobs will be lost. Public education, which requires property tax as well as resource taxes, would be vastly hurt in the West. It's a devastating concept, and especially when the discussion was all about how do we do it even if Congress says no.
All right, so we want to make sure that we include the response that we've gotten from the Department of Interior, their explanation for this. We have a part of that we want to show you. They say the preliminary internal discussion draft, referring to this memo, reflects some brainstorming discussions within BLM, the Bureau of Land Management, but no decisions have been made about which areas, if any, might merit more serious review and consideration. They say they're trying to be wise stewards of the land. Is that a good enough explanation for you?
No, because even though it may be brainstorming sessions, it still tells me what they're planning on doing, and they have implemented those along the way. So there are efforts to try and expand how much money they have. They want to be able, even though we have a $15 million backlog in maintaining the lands we already want, they have already passed some pieces of legislation to give them $1 billion a year to buy more property to expand what we already have. So I have seen elements of what those brainstorming sessions are in bits and pieces as they become coming through, and it still shows the same mindset. They want to cap more land, they want to control more land, they are willing to go after private property, and I'm sorry, this is devastating to the economy of the West.
Not only devastating to the economy of the West, but it could be devastating to rural communities like the one that you live in, like Georgetown, where you were last week. Am I correct on that?
Oh yeah, I mean it would be devastating to the family farm, or even to the big agriculture guys. A lot of what's happening now is you've got farmers renting the land from heirs who moved on, and they you own the property, and you got a farmer that's doing thousands of acres of land, but still it would devastate your control of your own property and your ability to make a living doing what you choose to do. And, I tell you,
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, what I was going to say is I know that a lot of this stuff is being done by executive order and by regulation. Would you be willing on the first day of office to tell Speaker Boehner or sponsor a bill that would nullify those particular regulations that were put in place for Agenda 21 and also defund any implementation of Agenda 21?
Oh yeah, I would definitely, because I tell you, the more I looked into it after last week, and no one here. I sit on an energy committee, and one of the things that was interesting was to me was they talk about broad goals in these things, and then you get these other stuff that's kind of hidden in there. And I had a paragraph in here that I had gotten out of one of the things where they were talking about their goals were combating poverty and changing consumption patterns and promoting health. And you sit there and you say, well, those are good ideas. Those are things you want to do. And then you see over here it says, and reducing private property ownership, single-family homes, private car ownership, privately owned farms. And you think, there's no way in America anybody's going to go for that last half. But if you're, it's like boiling the frog in the pot just a little bit at a time. You don't see that. As you go through this stuff, and as they start achieving more and more what they want to do, then they start regulating. And I'd say probably in the last 20 years, you can see how many more regulations we've got. It's grown out of control in a lot of areas. And when this president didn't get his the carbon emissions thing passed, he told the EPA, you start implementing, you start cracking down on these coal emission power plants and so forth. And we've got one, I think I mentioned this last week, but we've got one right here as you come in on 501 into Myrtle Beach. It actually, as you're coming out of Conway, to go into the little 20-minute stretch there. But it's Lake Busby's on one side, which is a man-made lake by Santee Cooper, and then the coal plant on the other side is the Granger power plant, which is the plant that started South Carolina back during Hurricane Hugo in 1989. It was the first black start across the state. Well, they're going to shut that plant down because it doesn't meet these EPA rules and regulations that he's put in just on the executive side, because the Congress didn't pass that. That's just that's families out of work.
I'm sitting here and I'm marveling at you. I mean, as a politician, I speak with politicians almost on a daily basis here in Washington D.C. And many of them, after receiving that question last week and knowing that they were going to come on my show, would have probably said,